Hi lovely, I'm Rachel, if we're just meeting for the first time. For 15 years, I really struggled with so much anxiety around food, and analysing food occupied so much of my mental space every single day. I mean, I'd think about food like 100% of the day. And basically everything I did and felt, and everything that I felt that I deserved to have in life, was so dependent on what my body looked like to me. So I've dedicated my career to help other people who are struggling in the same way, to not bark up the wrong tree and go down a path and continue to go down a path which can only end in misery, really. So today, here are 9 signs of disordered eating and bad body image. And if you relate to any of these, then firstly, know how common it is. Secondly, you're not alone. That's the same thing, but still, it's important. And thirdly, if you relate to any of these, it doesn't mean that you definitely have disordered eating and bad body image. It's just here for you to reflect on, because I think that it's really important. Food obsession is what I used to describe that state of stressing about food, analysing food, wondering constantly, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? Why am I going to eat? Those questions are popping up a lot, and in like a very confusing and overwhelming way. And there's a lot of analysis surrounding food, to the point that, you know, some people might even think about food 60, 70, 80, 90. I heard one person say that she's thought about food 100% of the day. So food obsession, analysing, stressing that much, rather than just kind of regular planning of meals and thinking about, where am I going to eat, or what do I fancy eating? Food obsession it's consuming, and it's very analytical, and it's very stressful, and that absolutely can be a sign of disordered eating. A second sign can be frequent or daily weighing, maybe even weighing, like body weighing, I mean, multiple times a day. But in addition to that, it's almost like it can be a compulsive feeling of, I need to check how much I weigh, because so much is riding on what that number says. So for example, someone with disordered eating and bad body image, they may go to the scale in the morning, and that number in the morning tells them, they may not be conscious of this, but that number tells them, if it's gone up, man, I'm gonna have a bad day. It is a bad day. I might, wear black today, wear baggy clothes today. Maybe I had friends, maybe I had plans with friends, and now I don't want to go out, and I feel insecure. Or if it's gone down, it's like, man, this is the best day ever. Like, I feel accomplished, I feel confident, I feel like I can do more stuff, I feel like I can be freer today. So it's not just the regular weighing, but it tends to be what the impact of that number is on the person that can be quite telling. For some people, it might even be that that number on the scale impacts their eating. So for someone with a healthy relationship with food and good body image, their eating tends to be coming from a more intuitive place, hunger cues and preferences and things like that. For someone with disordered eating and bad body image, it may be a case that when they go to the scale in the morning and they see a particular number, that number might influence the way that they are eating. They might, if it's gone up, they might think, or subconsciously think, ugh, I've been trying so hard, this isn't working anyway, I might as well just eat everything that I want to, and kind of go on to that extreme. Or they might see that the number's gone up and think, I'm going to eat significantly less today. And so that number can take them away from leaning on their intuitive cues, shall we say. Sign number 3 can be comparing bodies, like comparing my body to someone else's body, or just really noticing other people's bodies in general. And it might even be judging other people's bodies, which can really be not a reflection on them judging the other person for their body, but more indicative of what that person's body means to them. Someone that's experiencing bad body image, and a lot of their self-worth, shall we say, is tied up in what their body looks like, they might see a friend and spend quite a decent amount of time noticing what their friend's body looks like, or when they go to greet their friend, the first thing that they notice and kind of scan and kind of almost analyze in quite a quick way is, what does this person's body look like and how does mine sort of measure up in comparison? And that can work both ways. And this sometimes goes hand in hand with when someone's out and seeing people, they might be very preoccupied with what their body might look like to other people. And I remember, it makes me think of, for the longest time, years and years and years, if I sat down on a sofa, I would put a cushion over my tummy because I was hyper aware of maybe what my tummy looks like. Or if I was speaking with someone, I would be thinking about what my arms maybe look like and how big my arms look. And I would be constantly, unintentionally, scanning other people's bodies. And I don't even know what for. Sometimes it would be for reassurance of, oh look, this person's arms look like that and mine looks similar, so maybe it's okay that mine look like that. And sometimes it was out of jealousy or like trying to find inspirational motivation by looking at other people's bodies, like maybe that would motivate me to change my own. Another sign of disordered eating can be that if someone's looking back over the past year or even 6 months of their life and they can see sort of a trail of diets or plans or regimes surrounding food that have come and gone, but in addition to that, there's this sort of cycle that they can recognize, or this pattern that they can recognize of, I'm planning a new diet or a new way of eating, there's a whole new regime and it's going to be amazing and I'm super motivated, and then they lose control, or they feel exceptionally hungry, or they get loads of cravings and they kind of slip up in their mind, and then they lose control and they almost do this like little mini swing or maybe a big swing in the other direction of, oh, I'm going to eat everything that I want to then, and sort of move into like an overeating or binge eating territory. And then they felt really ashamed or disappointed in themselves or frustrated or angry with themselves, and then they plan a new way of eating or a new diet or a new weight loss journey, as it were. And so a really good sign often of disordered eating is that there's a clear pattern of that over at least the last few months, and maybe that it's even increasing in frequency, and it might even be accompanied with this increasing sense of the person of, I'm not disciplined enough, I'm not motivated enough, maybe I've got an addiction to food, or maybe I just like food more than other people, or maybe I just got unlucky and I'm naturally hungrier with more cravings than other people. And these sort of narratives have started to form. And there can be also this increasing sense of, I really can't trust myself around food, and this almost kind of disempowerment and demotivation, and diets and plans become harder and harder, it seems, to stick to. It's quite emotional and it's quite consuming. So that brings me nicely on to the next point, the next sign of disordered eating, which can be a sense of, I don't trust myself around food. A good example of this might be things like, oh no, I can't bring certain foods into my house because, you know, I wouldn't be able to control myself around them. Or I've got trigger foods. Or I'm not gonna start eating that cookie or that biscuit. I'm not even gonna have one because I know that if I have one, then I'm gonna eat all of them. So it shows up in these sorts of ways of, I can't be trusted around food. And this is different to someone who has a really healthy relationship with food, and I'm generalizing now. But if you look around where you are and kind of look at some kind of mundane objects which are around you, like I've got this mug here, and just pick one of them and wonder, do I trust myself around this object? It might seem like a ridiculous question to even ask. And someone with a really healthy relationship with food tends to feel that way about food as well. Like if someone were to ask them, do you trust yourself around food? It might feel equally as ridiculous of a question, but someone with disordered eating may feel very differently, very, very differently. And that idea of being able to be around food so freely and not think about it and not have to worry or analyze or stress in any way or not have any sense of maybe I'll lose control, that for someone with disordered eating, that can feel like an alien concept. That, and all of these actually, are extremely common, more common than a lot of people who are struggling may realize. And I think a good testament to this is all of the videos that I make surrounding this topic. The comment section is just filled with the statement of, I really thought that I was alone in this. I thought I was the only one. And it's so relieving to know that it's not just me. A sixth sign of disordered eating can be not honoring hunger cues. And what I mean when I say that is we all experience sort of physical hunger on a spectrum from really, really desperately, ravenously hungry to extremely full, like extremely full, past comfort levels of full. And someone with disordered eating may not be able to honor their hunger cues, maybe because they can't recognize how physically hungry or how satiated they are. That's possible. Or they may be able to recognize when they're hungry and satiated, but be deliberately ignoring it. And that can come on both sides of the spectrum. It can be, I'm trying to make myself go hungry, or not trying to make myself go hungry, but I don't want to honor my hunger because I'm fearful of eating too much. I don't trust my hunger levels, or I think that, I should be eating less than what my body's asking for because I'm afraid of weight gain, or I'm trying to lose weight, for example. So ignoring hunger cues there. And it might also be on the other side of, I recognize that I feel satiated. I'm full, I'm satisfied. No, I'm not satisfied. I'm full and satiated to some degree, and yet I want to keep eating. I feel this almost compulsion and this urge to keep eating, and like I need to keep eating past that in order to feel satisfied. I do just want to make the caveat that there are a few different reasons why someone might not be able to hear their hunger cues, which have nothing to do with disordered eating, but it can show up in disordered eating that someone has lost touch with even being able to hear their hunger and satiety cues because they've been deliberately ignoring them for so long and almost invalidating them for so long and dismissing them regularly enough that, or analyzing it so heavily that they no longer have that sort of intuitive feeling of hunger and satiety because it's become so analytical and so conscious. And I liken that to, I had a period where I had really bad anxiety when I was younger, and it kind of centered around my breathing, and I would get very in my own head and very analytical about, am I breathing enough? I'm not breathing normally anymore. And then it became so analytical and so conscious that I just lost that intuitive sense of how to breathe and when it was time to breathe in and when it was time to breathe out, right? And so that's what I liken it to, that some of these body signals, if we become too analytical about them and too conscious, then we can confuse ourselves, and then it can feel like we can't recognize them anymore. The trouble that a lot of people run up against is, because you might wonder, well, why do I need to follow my hunger cues? Why do I need to hear them? Why is that even important? I know how many calories I need. I've been onto a calorie counter. I know how many calories I need, so I'll just follow that. Imagine someone that you know, or just try to picture someone that has a really healthy relationship with food. So they're in balance, they nourish themselves, but they can eat a slice of cake and it's not a big deal. And they don't track or count or analyze much at all in regards to their food. They just kind of eat freely without over or under eating. Not a big deal to them. And they've always been like this. Then imagine saying to that person, or if we say to that person, forget about following your kind of natural hunger and satiety and satisfaction and preferences there. Just forget about that. I know how many calories you need in a day, and it's absolutely perfect. Just eat this many calories in a day, every single day. And watch what happens to their relationship with food overnight. having to stick to that exact calorie limit. And I think that's the best way of kind of articulating it, because it's really complex. But just imagine what would happen to someone's relationship with food, and how much they'd have to start thinking about food and planning it. And what if they're hungrier for more calories on one day? Does that mean that they have to go hungry? You know, then they're going to be thinking about food a lot. Or what if they're not hungry enough for that number of calories that day? Do they have to force feed themselves, you know? And then all of a sudden these can just sort of escalate, and you can see how someone could go from something which just never crossed their mind to now it's taking up quite a large portion of their mind, and it's not feeling particularly great or comfortable either. Another potential sign of disordered eating is being really quite aware of what other people around you are eating, how much they're eating, what kind of diet maybe are they on, are they following any particular plan, how are they knowing when to eat. So kind of quite aware of other people's food choices, and also quite a lot of curiosity into how do they know how to make food decisions. And that can be quite reflective of, I don't know how to make decisions around food. That's a confusing and overwhelming topic for me. So something which can show up is almost using other people's food choices when around them as like a guide or a measure of how you should be eating. And a client of mine articulated this really well in an example the other day. She said she noticed for the first time that her best friend, they were having, as she called it, a slumber party. They were having a slumber party, and her best friend said, "Do you want another cookie?" And my client said, "Do you want another cookie?" And the best friend then said, "Well, I'll have one if you have one." And then my client said, "Well, you know, I'll have one then if you want to have one." And she came with this little anecdote and story, because she said she then reflected for the first time and said, that was really peculiar. I didn't even stop to think about whether I wanted a cookie or not. And she said once she did afterwards, she recognized that she didn't, in this particular example, want a cookie, but she was going to have a cookie just because her best friend was having one. And she also noticed that the same thing had been true in reverse many times, which is she would want to eat something, but if someone around her wasn't having the dessert, let's say at the restaurant, or they're not having a dessert, so do you know what, then I will leave the dessert. So making food choices based on other people, and also being very, very aware of how other people are eating. And that can also be a sign of, I don't trust myself around food. You know, I'm not capable of knowing how to make decisions for myself. Sign number 8 of disordered eating can be watching or consuming or trying to seek out a lot of food related and potentially weight loss related content online. Spending a lot of time researching about nutrition, weight loss journeys, listening to other people's weight loss journeys for motivation, watching loads of what I eat in a day videos, and the context of that being, I am not happy with my eating, I'm not happy maybe with my weight, and so what are other people doing? What are other people doing that maybe I haven't tried that maybe I could try that would allow me to have better control or more motivation around sticking to an eating plan or my weight loss journey. And something which I would do a lot of, which I think a lot of people can relate to when they have disordered eating and bad body image, is using other people's stories on YouTube or content in this way to build motivation to withstand the pain of dieting. So I would have so many times where I was trying to lose weight, I was on a diet plan, I was trying to maintain that rigid control and not slip up. And I'd get really hungry, or I'd be obsessing over food. And so I would go to weight loss journey, I'd type that into YouTube, or what I eat in a day, to watch these other people, generally women, people that I felt inspired by, shall we say, and I would use that as basically weight loss motivation and motivation to stop myself from slipping up and giving into my hunger and cravings. That can be really damaging for a few different reasons, a variety of different reasons. The ones that stand out to me most are that it can reinforce this idea or this narrative of there's something wrong with me, that I can't stick to this eating plan, and that I'm really hungry or have all of these cravings. There's something wrong with me because look, these other people are doing it, and of course it seems like they're doing it so easily, and so it can reinforce this idea of isolation, or like I'm struggling with liking food too much and this is a problem which I hold on my own. It also can be really damaging because if someone has disordered eating, then their problem is not a lack of motivation. And if they're using this type of content and seeking this type of content out like I was, then they're doing so to try to build up motivation, and therefore they don't actually understand the problem that they have. Because if someone has disordered eating, then using this approach, there's no amount of, let's say, motivation that someone could really build that would allow them to have a healthy relationship with food and like peace and balance in the way that they're eating. Something that I often hear, I often hear, and I also see it in practice as well, from people who've moved to a healthy relationship with food, and then they have that balance, and they're kind of reflecting on why haven't I done this sooner, is they will say things like, considering how much time I spent looking up this type of content, planning diets and weight loss journeys and thinking about food, all of that combined, that took up so much of my days and my weeks and my years, sometimes decades. I could have done so much else with that time. I could have spent that time with my family, building connections. I could have spent that time setting up a business. I could have spent that time studying. I could have spent that time just working and being paid an hourly rate. And I didn't. I chose for it to be all centered around food because it felt like it had to be all centered around food and weight loss. And the reason it was so centered around that was because I didn't know I could have a healthy relationship with food, and gaining control over my eating habits and over my body was the single most important thing in my life. And I think those two things combined, them not realizing they could have a healthy relationship with food and weight and body control being the most important thing in their life, that to me is why this whole practice of spending so much time consuming this type of content can be damaging and also a sign of disordered eating. If you want to hear more about my personal journey with disordered eating, to see if it's something that you resonate with, then a video that I really recommend is the video I made called I Failed to Lose Weight for 10 Years. Here's what I learned. I've already made so many videos on this topic, and I will continue to make a lot more videos on relationship with food, improving peace and balance around food, and building up confidence. So if that's something which might be helpful for you, then feel free to subscribe. It'd be a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.